$200 million. That's how much of your money was spent, not to build schools, not to protect communities, not even to strengthen the border, but to produce glossy high-budget commercials. Ads that look and sound like campaign spots, starring none other than Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem. And when Representative Rosa DeLauro saw it, she didn't hold back. She called it what it was: propaganda, dressed up as policy. In a hearing that few expected to go viral, DeLauro pulled the curtain back on one of the boldest examples of taxpayer-funded self-promotion in recent memory. What she revealed stunned the room, not because it was complicated, but because it was so blatant. The hearing started like any other, with prepared notes and talking points.
The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the entire committee with an excellent sense of patience. The gentlelady from Connecticut, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and ranking member. Madam Secretary, earlier this year, the administration unveiled a thinly veiled propaganda ad about border security. This is about $200 million paid for by American taxpayers, I might add. And the ads are supposedly about border security, but honestly, if you see the ad, it's like a political ad, and all of us know what political ads look like. Even the conservative Cato Institute says the ads are a perfect example of wasteful government spending that DOJ should cut. I also might add that, and this is a direct quote, and Madam Secretary, it says that earlier this year that President Trump had instructed you on how to fashion the campaign. He said, and again I quote, "I want you in the ads. I want your face in the ads," Noem recalled at the Conservative Political Action Conference, adding that Trump told her for the first ad, quote, "I want you to thank me for closing the border." Now, that's politics, quite frankly, at its worst. I understand that on April 30th, your department awarded an additional $6.7 million to a political consulting company called People Who Think, bringing their total award for this ad to $11.6 million. Your department has also awarded $35.5 million for this ad to a company called Safe American Media. And my understanding is that you used funding originally appropriated for CBP and USCIS for these awards. This sounds like a payout to Republican political consultants to fund ads that do more to tout the president than to secure the border. How were the contracts awarded? Competitive process? If so, why is USA Spending say that the contracts were given an exclusion from the DOJ group's limitation on spending awards? This is $200 million. Somebody just talked about billboards. This is a $200 million ad campaign taking the money from CBP and USCIS to promote a political advantage. It's really kind of the height of arrogance. You're looking for more money from us to do that, but you're going to take a portion of the money that we have given you and you're going to spend it on political advertising. I mean, that really is, in Yiddish, the word is chutzpah. It really is that you engaged in here. So I know you're going to tell
me. Would you like me to answer?
Yeah, I would. And I foresee that you're going to tell me that these were all competitively bid.
They were.
Et cetera.
Done through the exact same process as any other ad campaign would be done, absolutely. And I would tell you that it's not $200 million and that President Trump was very clear from the very beginning that he recognized that the fake news in this country was not going to tell the truth of what the work had been done at the border to secure this country. And these ads aren't only playing in the United States, they're playing in other countries where we had the largest invasion coming into this country from. And overwhelmingly, if you look at the data on the ground in these countries where these ads have been
with all
playing,
due respect,
the flow has stopped.
With all due respect.
Even when I was in Mexico and having
Excuse me, Madam
conversations.
Secretary, the time is mine. With all due respect, this is a political ad campaign, and let's just not try to sugarcoat it. I had just somebody talk about billboards, and you talking about how use of taxpayers' dollars. These are taxpayers' dollars as well. Let me move to the program I mentioned earlier. This is the BRIC program. In early April, FEMA cut the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, claiming, and I quote, "Under Secretary Noem, DHS is eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse," end quote. When the committee staff asked for evidence of waste, fraud, or abuse in this program, or the authority used to end the program, FEMA said that the due diligence for these projects can take a long time and failed to give examples that met GAO's definition of waste, fraud, or abuse. The legal authority you used to cancel most of these projects was also not provided. And I'm just going to make this flat-out statement. You do not have, nor does the president have, the legal authority to abrogate what the Appropriations Committee appropriates. It's the power of the purse. It's in the Constitution. And I think if I heard right in the last couple of days, the president wasn't sure that we should abide by the Constitution. But we tried to abide by the Constitution, those of us who raised our right hand and said we will abide by the Constitution. There is no legal authority. There is no inherent authority to claim the appropriations funds can be used for other than what they were appropriated for. I don't know that you can. Basic questions from your agency on essential programs that the communities represent or rely on. You all can't. You should just say waste, fraud, abuse, and you think that that covers it. Well, Madam Secretary, I will tell you it doesn't. We're going to challenge that, and you have no authority.
References that we are operating under the authority that the Department of Homeland Security
You
has.
have no
and that
authority
these
to
BRIC
abrogate
grants-
these funds. It's
These
the
BRIC grants are
prerogative
being
of the
reevaluated
Appropriations
to make
Committee.
sure that they are
The
being
power
spent
of the
appropriately
purse
to which
resides
you all
here
directed they be
and not there. Keep it in mind because it is the Constitution of the United States. Thank you.
Very familiar
I'm
with.
happy to have this conversation take place off the clock, but now we're going to move to the gentleman.
But it didn't stay that way. DeLauro looked across the room and said what every frustrated taxpayer has probably thought, $200 million, paid by Americans. And it looks like a political ad. Then she laid out the receipts. The Department of Homeland Security, under Noem's leadership, had funded a massive media campaign supposedly about border security. But according to DeLauro, the ads weren't about security at all, they were about image. They were about creating a narrative that credited one administration for something it was already legally obligated to do. And when Noem was asked where the idea came from, her own words from a public conference said it all. She'd been told directly by a top political leader, "I want you in the ads. I want your face in the ads." That's not policy, that's branding, with your tax dollars. DeLauro's outrage wasn't performance, it was constitutional. Because here's the thing, those funds weren't free-floating campaign money. They were appropriated by Congress for very specific purposes, programs like Customs and Border Protection, and U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. Agencies meant to keep borders secure, process immigration cases and support law enforcement operations. But instead of strengthening those programs, tens of millions were diverted to private media contractors. One company, People Who Think, received nearly $12 million. Another, Safe American Media, pulled in more than $35 million. Both had ties to political consulting circles. Together they accounted for almost $50 million of a campaign that was supposed to be about public information, but in reality felt more like a personal publicity tour. DeLauro didn't stop there. She went further, pressing Noem on how those contracts were awarded. Were they open bids? Were there safeguards to prevent political favoritism? The answer was buried under bureaucratic phrasing. Noem insisted that the ads followed all proper processes, but her tone told a different story. DeLauro's voice cut through, "This is taxpayer money, and it looks like a payout." She wasn't exaggerating. Even conservative think tanks like the Cato Institute called the campaign an example of wasteful government spending. And when you have groups from both sides of the aisle agreeing on that, you know something's seriously off. But this wasn't just about wasted money. What DeLauro exposed was a mindset, one where public service becomes self-service. When Noem was confronted about the ads, she defended them by saying that mainstream media wouldn't tell the truth, and that these government-funded spots were necessary to show the real story. That reasoning may sound familiar, because it's the same logic authoritarian regimes use to justify state-run propaganda, the idea that only the government can correct the media by speaking directly to the people on the people's dime. And that's where the danger lies. Because once a government decides that transparency means controlling the message, the line between democracy and manipulation starts to blur. As DeLauro put it, this isn't just bad budgeting, it's an attack on the foundation of accountability. Congress, not the executive branch, holds the power of the purse. Every dollar must be used as Congress intended. That's not an opinion, it's the Constitution. And yet here was an administration treating appropriations like a suggestion, not a legal boundary. DeLauro called it what it was: arrogance. She reminded the room that neither the president nor any department secretary has the authority to redirect congressional funds for political advantage. That's not governing, it's overreach. And it undermines the checks and balances designed to keep any one branch of government from acting like it owns the nation's wallet. While this multi-million-dollar ad campaign rolled out, something else happened quietly. FEMA's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, known as BRIC, was cut. This program helps towns prepare for disasters like floods and wildfires. It builds levees, strengthens emergency response systems, and literally saves lives. But when FEMA was asked why it was slashing funds, the excuse was waste, fraud, and abuse. And yet when the committee demanded examples, none were given. There was no evidence, just rhetoric. Projects that could have prevented destruction in vulnerable areas were stalled or scrapped altogether, while DHS bragged about a PR blitz. Imagine that, cutting real-world protection to finance political storytelling. That moment in the hearing, when DeLauro connected those two threads, was devastating. She looked straight at the secretary and said, "You do not have the legal authority to reallocate what Congress appropriates." Then she paused and added, "It's in the Constitution." You could hear the frustration in her voice. She wasn't just angry at the misuse of funds, she was angry that accountability itself had become optional. When government agencies start seeing oversight as interference instead of obligation, democracy begins to rot from within. And this hearing exposed that rot in real time. But the deeper issue is cultural, not just legal. Somewhere along the line, governance turned into marketing. Political leadership stopped being about serving people and started being about selling an image. Strong, tough, decisive, these aren't policy goals, they're slogans. And when slogans start costing hundreds of millions in taxpayer money, the system isn't just broken, it's being exploited. Rosa DeLauro wasn't just questioning Kristi Noem, she was questioning an entire philosophy of leadership that confuses publicity with performance. A government that needs commercials to prove its effectiveness has already lost sight of what real effectiveness looks like. And that's what makes this story more than just another hearing. It's a warning. Because once propaganda becomes normal, the truth becomes negotiable. Noem defended her ads by saying they were also shown overseas, to deter illegal entry from other countries. But even that defense fell apart when DeLauro pointed out the absurdity. International TV spots aren't border enforcement, they're messaging. You can't stop migration with commercials. What those ads really did was project a political image, paid for by Americans who never consented to fund it. The irony is painful. The administration claimed it was eliminating waste, all while wasting hundreds of millions to tell taxpayers how well it was saving them money. By the midpoint of the hearing, Noem's answers had shifted from confident to defensive. Every time she said respectfully, it sounded like a shield. Every time she said data shows results, DeLauro countered with show us the contracts. This wasn't just a clash between two officials, it was a live demonstration of how accountability should work. A representative of the people demanding answers from a public servant who forgot who the real boss is, the taxpayer. And as dry as hearings may seem, this one was electric. Because in those exchanges the stakes were clear: transparency versus theater, oversight versus vanity. Even after all the questioning, Noem stood by her decisions. She claimed the campaign had reduced illegal crossings because of its messaging abroad. But the committee had seen the footage. It wasn't data, it was spin. And that's what made DeLauro's closing remarks hit harder than any soundbite. She said, "This isn't about partisan politics, it's about the Constitution." In that moment, the entire hearing room seemed to pause. Because no matter which side of the aisle you're on, that statement cuts deep. The Constitution doesn't bend for public relations. It doesn't yield to ego. It exists to protect the integrity of how power is used and how money is spent. If you zoom out, this story is about more than Kristi Noem or Rosa DeLauro. It's about what happens when the machinery of government starts serving personal narratives instead of national needs. The $200 million spent here isn't just a number, it's a reflection of priorities. While communities face crumbling infrastructure, climate disasters, and economic strain, their money went into scripted videos. And that's the real scandal, not corruption in the traditional sense, but corruption of purpose. When leaders forget that public funds belong to the public, the democratic contract breaks down. What makes this all the more alarming is how normalized it's becoming. The secretary didn't deny it was political, she justified it. She said the media wouldn't tell the truth, so her department had to. That line alone should terrify anyone who values free press. Because the minute a government believes it must correct the media using state-funded messaging, it steps into dangerous territory. That's how propaganda starts, not with censorship but with replacement. When truth becomes a PR campaign, trust dies quietly. And DeLauro's warning was clear. Leadership isn't about self-promotion, it's about stewardship. That line should be carved into every public office. Stewardship means you are trusted with something that doesn't belong to you, the people's resources, the people's safety, the people's faith. When you use that trust for personal or political image building, you're not leading, you're exploiting. The ads may have looked patriotic, but patriotism isn't measured by how many flags appear in a commercial. It's measured by how responsibly you use the people's money when no one's watching. In the end, this hearing wasn't just about exposing misuse, it was about reminding the nation what good governance actually looks like. Rosa DeLauro didn't raise her voice for show, she raised it because the stakes are real, because if we stop demanding accountability, if we shrug off the idea of oversight as just politics, then the slow drift toward state-sponsored storytelling becomes permanent. That's how democracies lose their reflection, they stop recognizing themselves. So the next time you hear about a multi-million-dollar campaign, or see a government ad that feels just a little too polished, ask yourself the same question DeLauro asked that day: who paid for this and why? Because democracy doesn't die in one moment, it erodes through complacency, through the quiet normalization of arrogance, and every taxpayer-funded ad that promotes power instead of people pushes that erosion one step further. At the heart of all this is a simple truth: public money should serve public good. It should build schools, fund safety, strengthen communities and protect lives, not personalities. When you hear someone in government say, "We're cutting waste," but what they're really doing is cutting programs that matter while expanding their own visibility, that's not fiscal responsibility, it's betrayal dressed as efficiency. Rosa DeLauro saw it, called it out, and reminded everyone that oversight isn't a nuisance, it's the heartbeat of democracy. If you made it this far, here's the takeaway: democracy doesn't survive on slogans, it survives on accountability. And it's up to all of us to keep watching, questioning, and demanding that those in power remember whose money they're spending and whose trust they're holding. Because once we stop asking, they stop answering. If you believe taxpayer dollars should serve people, not politicians, share this video, drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit subscribe. Your voice is part of the oversight that keeps power honest, and together we can make sure that the people's money once again serves the people.